Thank you, Jim. I think that song is the first time I remember pulling the tune of the music into the text of the words. That I remember somebody in my home church when I was a little kid singing that song, and that grounded, whatever, sure and deep, like that. And I thought, yeah, and you hear the piano go, that was a moment. Sorry, I just remember that. We're back in the book of Mark tonight. If you can find a Bible, you could turn to Mark, Gospel of Mark, the 5th chapter. So be careful of whiplash. We're moving fast. Mark 5, verse 1. They went across the lake, this is Jesus and the disciples. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained, hand and foot. But he tore the chains apart and broke the irons that were on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out, and he would cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him and shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on a nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." He gave them permission. And the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs, and the herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. On Jesus' suggestion, you recall, at the end of chapter 4, he and his disciples left a place where he had been teaching the crowds on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. Mark says they left in the evening, and they sailed east to the region of the Gerasenes. Now, in other Gospels, this is referred to the region of the Gadarenes or the Gergesenes. And that's because there were 3 towns by those names in that general area. Gerasa, the larger, best known of the cities, and then Gadara, the next largest, and then Gergesa. The region was also called the Decapolis, that area of ground. That word, it's obviously of Greek origin. It means 10 cities. And that is the area sort of loosely around the southeastern part of the Sea of Galilee. And it comes down around to where the Jordan River exits to the south. While we're talking geographically, I might also mention that the Sea of Galilee, which Luke calls by its more ancient name, the Lake of Gennesaret, it's the same place. It's around 700 feet below sea level. It's the world's second lowest lake, next to the world's lowest lake or body of water, which is the what? Dead Sea. Mm-hmm. It's the only one that's geographically lower. Anyway, it was on this evening trip across the lake that Jesus, calmed this great storm that had come up suddenly and that has caused great fear in the disciples' hearts. But of course, their fear of the storm paled in comparison to the fear that they felt as Jesus stopped the storm with just a word. And that's what caused them to say, "Who is this?" That the wind and the waves obey him. That's what they asked themselves as they were probably wondering if they should have awoken Jesus or not. The power of nature, we said, and especially the power of the sea, was the greatest power they knew in their world. Remember back then, there were no nuclear bombs, there was no electricity generating stations, there was no bulldozers, there's no gunpowder. So nothing was more powerful in that day than the forces of nature. And here, in that boat, on that lake, in the late evening, Jesus demonstrates that he controlled even them. Even nature listened to Jesus' voice. But we see here tonight that Jesus' demonstration of power was really just beginning. When they landed on the east side that night, they encountered a whole host of interesting things here. Now, first, we need to understand that those who lived in that region were not, at least in this point in history, they were primarily not Jews. So Jesus and his disciples were, you might say, on foreign soil. How do we know this? Well, one reason is that we know that the area was settled by Greeks that traced their roots back centuries to Alexander the Great. That's why the name of the area is Decapolis. That's a Greek word. But you don't have to know even that much history to know that that was not a Jewish area. We know it's not a Jewish area because Jews do not keep pigs. Pigs are unclean to Jews. So we are meant to understand that what happens there happens on foreign soil, outside the Jewish spiritual realm, okay? And certainly this is no surprise, by the way, that these were Greeks or these were not Jews who lived there at that moment. The ownership of this little piece of land, the Decapolis area, is part of the Golan Heights today. You've heard that on the news. The ownership of that little piece of land is as disputed as the whole of Israel has been disputed throughout history. In that area today, there are Palestinians, there are Arabs, there are Greeks, there are Jewish settlers there, most of them either current or former citizens of Syria. Today, I think that area is still governed and claimed by Israel, yet the United States is the only other nation in the world that accepts that. So it's a contested place. All that to say, it was a Gentile area, okay? So upon their landing, a man confronts them, who we're told lives in the tombs. Now, tombs, graveyards, and dead bodies that all of that represents were, like pigs, considered unclean by Jewish standards. In later Judaism, spending the night on a grave or near a grave was taken as a sign that you have gone mad. And if you wonder where they ever got an idea like that, behold this man, okay? He was obviously very mentally disturbed, and Mark attributes his condition to demons. Now here we are, 2,000 plus years later, and we still don't know really much about demonic possession. Some today won't even talk about it. They try to psychologize away the power of the demonic. Other people seem to find a demon behind every urge, every feeling, and every shrub around them. So like everything else, we tend to race to either one side or the other. But there is a lot of middle ground in the middle. Mental illness is real. It is not necessarily always the result of demonic oppression or possession. It's a result of the fallen condition of humanity. But sometimes it is the result of the direct work of the enemy in a person's life, as was the case here. Demonic forces had overtaken this fellow. They'd given him superhuman strength. Look at the stuff that he could do. And yet they left him utterly broken and isolated and destructive, primarily to himself. So as Tom Wright says, this man who rushed out of the tombs where he lived, near a field of pigs, to meet Jesus and his disciples, this guy was about as unclean as you could get. Okay? Remember, too, that that Jesus and his disciples, they left the western shore of Galilee in the evening. We're told that. And we know that where they crossed, the lake is about 6 miles wide. So, barring the issues of the storm, the trip would not have taken, even with a brief storm, it would have not taken all that long. And then where they landed was this barren, rocky hillside with these dark, gaping holes, caves that were used as the tomb. So can you get that picture in your mind? They're in a foreign place, in a graveyard, in the dead of night, when demons were most active. And there they are immediately confronted by the perfect horror movie character, you see. So this trip was surely the disciples' worst nightmare come true. They've been more afraid on this trip than they probably had ever been in their life. And that's very likely precisely why Jesus took them there. If Jesus is to gather followers that truly trust him, then they have to believe that he is truly more powerful than, that he can defeat, he can conquer anything or anyone who might stand against him. So, against the power of nature, back on the lake, Jesus is 1-0. But what about Jesus against the spirits of evil? And against a whole legion of spirits. This is Jesus against what is in name the largest unit of the Roman army, legion. And beyond that, it's Jesus against legion on legion's home turf. So the question is, can Jesus win on the road against the largest, most hostile of enemies and with a hostile crowd? Well, it turns out nobody plays road games better than Jesus. In fact, Jesus puts into action right here the very words that he had said to the crowd back in chapter 3. Remember, he told them, no one can enter into the strong man's house and take his possessions unless he first ties up the strong man. So Jesus here ties up the strong man, the enemy, the oppressor, and he restores and he redeems. Jesus frees the man that the enemy had taken captive. He proves himself, Jesus does, utterly powerful, completely sovereign over even Satan's best demonic efforts, even in the tombs, even at night, even among foreign peoples on Satan's own turf. That's how the Jews would have thought of it anyway. But Jesus' method raises some questions, doesn't it? Why did he do this like he did? Why did all this go down like it did? Why all the discussion between Jesus and the demons? Why did he even talk to him or them or whatever? Like always, the demonic forces not only recognized Jesus, they also recognized his authority and they recognized his power. In fact, they begged him, verse 7 there says, to not torture them. And verse 10 there too, to not send them out of the region. That's interesting. What does that mean? Well, the word for torture there is usually used for the punishment of prisoners. And the tense of the Greek word for begging there is ongoing, which means it was not just one request that the demons made. They were whining, they were begging, they were pleading in their hope to avoid the punishment. So what were they asking? What were they asking? Some think that they knew Jesus was going to remove them from the man, their host. But they did not want to be expelled from the geographical area where they were used to working successfully, Another, maybe a better guess, is that they were asking Jesus to not send them immediately to the judgment that is promised to all demons, the abyss. That's where all demons and Satan himself will ultimately end. We hear that several places through the New Testament. So why did they ask to go into the pigs? Of course, we don't know. But the symbolism is probably significant in some way. The unclean demons asked to be sent into the unclean pigs. Maybe it's just a case of like knowing like, like preferring like. And why did Jesus grant their request? That's beyond my pay grade. You'll have to ask him when you see him face to face. But notice this. Jesus did not order them into the pigs. He simply allowed what the demons asked of him to happen. And this is an important theological point. You see, we're tempted often to assume that Jesus either knew or intended that the pigs would kill themselves. But that's not necessarily the case. Jesus' mission in the world was not to rid the world of pigs. Jesus did not kill the pigs. God created pigs. God called pigs good. God likes pigs. I like pigs, especially with fried eggs. It was the demons acting out in the pigs the very same self-destructive behavior that they tried to act out in the man. It was the demons that killed the pigs. It was not Jesus. Jesus merely let the demons do as their hearts were already inclined to do. And this is very typical behavior of God. God very often gets blamed for things that he does not do. In our lives, God lets us have our way. We hurt ourselves by doing something God did not want us to do in the first place, and then we turn around and blame God for the pain. Why does he allow some things and not others to come about in our lives? We can't be sure. But we can know that his character is that of a teacher, a preserver, and a rescuer. And when he is which in our lives serves his greater purposes for our good. That's about all we can know. And we hang our hat on that. Verse 14. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and the countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. There were two distinctly different reactions to all that happened there on the east coast of Galilee. That of the people of the region and that of the man who was delivered from the demons. The people's reaction of anger and rejection, that may tell us why the demons were happy there among them. These were a people who cared more about pigs, or put another way, these were people who cared more about profits, profits, than about people. Their financial loss was way more important to them than the healing of this man. That is, and has always been, a great danger of our materialistic world. The valuation of the human life. We talked about this for a couple weeks. What is a man's life worth? What is a woman's life worth? What is a child's life worth? That was a question there on this day, and that is still a question that confronts our world today. In issues of slavery, human trafficking, sex trafficking, care for the poor, care for the addicted, care for the mentally disturbed. What is a person's life worth? We can be rather indignant about this, but it's well worth considering, okay? If you were there, if I was there, and some of those pigs belonged to you or to me, would you have celebrated the man's healing and restoration, or would you have been angry at the loss of your capital? Beyond this, there are other people, especially in our day, who elevate the status of animals to near human levels, who lament the death of the pigs simply because pigs died. But those who do that, they really illustrate how broken our conceptions of value are or have become. As we said a couple weeks ago, in God's economy and in his valuation, one man's life is worth far, far more than many birds, Jesus said. And also, of course, more than any number of pigs. And even beyond that, the value of ending the potential for greater harm that those demons represented in that area, that was easily worth the death of a couple thousand pigs. Far better for pigs to die than the man or the people that he encountered and the greater world around him to continue to be harmed, even eternally, by allowing those demons to keep doing their destructive work through this guy and through those that he engaged with. Now, certainly God does not wish harm on animals, but animals are not people. And God will certainly sacrifice any number of animals for the good of a person. Yet the misdirected values of our broken world often do not see much value in what God is doing among us, just like they did not see the value of what he was doing here. But at least one person there did understand the value. Verse 18, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis, the 10 cities area, how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. As you might imagine, the man who was healed knew the significance of what had happened. And he was so grateful that he wanted to stay with Jesus. Jesus said, "No, go home and tell your people what the Lord has done for you." And that's what he did. Notice in all the other instances of personal healing, Jesus told those who were healed not to tell people. Here, Jesus tells them to tell them. Probably because the purpose of Jesus' messianic ministry would not have been misinterpreted by Gentiles as it would have and as it was by Jews. He came to his own, but his own did not recognize him. You see? Some have said that it was actually this man and not really the Apostle Paul who was technically the first missionary to the Gentiles. And so he was. He went to his own Gentile people of the Decapolis, and he told them about Jesus and what Jesus did for him. So, was that the whole reason for Jesus coming across the lake? I mean, notice, the man came to thank him as Jesus was getting back into the boat. So apparently his time there was pretty short. Could it be that Jesus came across the lake, through the storm, performed this miracle, and then just turned around and sailed right back to the western shore at the people's request? Did he do that just to display his power over nature and over the demonic realms, and also to begin the work of spreading his kingdom there among the Gentiles? I think so, since that seems to be exactly what he did. He saw the man's hurting and oppression, certainly. But Jesus also saw, you see, the hurting and the oppression of that whole area, that whole people, sheep without a shepherd. So he came to begin the healing of the many by healing the one and charging the one then to go and tell. Go and tell. Like Jesus told his disciples before, his kingdom starts small. He's given them an illustration of this. His kingdom starts small, but it grows, and it grows, and it grows through the one who he's healed, telling the one who is hurting. That's how his kingdom grows. The one who's healed tells the one who's hurting, hey, can I just tell you, look what Jesus did for me, and he will do the same for you. Jesus didn't need another person following him around Galilee. He needed someone who would display his power to the world for the sake of the world's healing. And that's what Jesus found in this most unlikely of missionaries. You know, think about this. Can you imagine this guy applying to a mission board today? You know, questionnaire, going out through the questionnaire. Where have you lived? I lived in the Tombs for the last, Have you ever been under the influence of some mind-altering substance? He'd reply, well, something like that. How'd you get all those cuts? Tried to kill myself a bunch of times. Oh. Jesus needs people who so trust in his ability that they will confidently display his power to his world for the sake of the world's healing. This guy could see the needs of those around him unlike anybody else in that area, because he'd lived it, he'd experienced it, and he'd found healing in Jesus. Jesus needed to find somebody like this guy here. He was the perfect one. And he found him in this guy. The question is, will Jesus find somebody like that in us? Will we just go and tell those around us what Jesus has done for us? That's what we're charged to do. You and I, we may have never been under the oppression of a demon or a legion of them. But all of us who are redeemed today, we have a story to tell. And we have a world around us. There's somebody in our sphere of influence, there's somebody around us that we can relate to that needs to hear what God has done for us. Lord, it was so easy for this guy. You were there in the flesh, and you looked him in the eye, and you said to him, go and tell your people what I've done for you. I can't help but believe that you're telling your church to do that today. In fact, I know you are. Lead us to those people that can hear our testimony. Show us those people who are hurting, maybe like we were, maybe not exactly like we were, but show us those people who are looking, show us those people who are hurting, and let us be bold to tell them all that you have done for us. In your name we pray. Amen.